feel very good. Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the final round, round 6 of the first weekly of the Eternal Tournament Series, Season 3. We are going to be getting into our matchup right here with Manilojo on Rakano Plate versus Mephy on aReNGee. Stone Scar Maulers?
Stone Scar Maulers.
Stone Scar Maulers.
So, some interesting choices, as Mephy's deck is playing only a single stash, so it's more of a Stone Scar deck with some mauls and flails than it is a true like a stash deck. So definitely looking for more of an aggressive stance. And Manilojo's deck, let's see if we've got anything interesting.
Oh, it has the Longhorn Sergeant.
Okay.
This is what we saw at the end of the last round, but we unfortunately came in a little too late to really take advantage of it. But he is playing 4 Longhorn Sergeants in the main, so possibly taking a little bit more of a defensive strategy, or just trying to rely more on his Warcry triggers.
And we are down in the match, so we're looking at an opening hand with only a single power. Toss a redraw here, and Manilojo gets... Oh, that's a solid opening hand.
Yeah, Manilojo actually... Manilojo getting the Crown Watch Paladin down here, or sorry, not Crown Watch Paladin. Rakano Outlaw gets an Inspire off, and Mephy had the Charchain Flail, but unfortunately after that, not much going on so far for him. See if he can pick up something he can actually handle this Rakano Outlaw with. He held back on 3 powers, so he might have something like a Cabal Countess, but that's not going to be good enough here. Could be a Torch as well, or an Annihilate, but nothing there, blank. So Rakano Outlaw is going to get in, pick up a Warcry trigger, put down a little bit of damage. We see Manilojo firing off another Inspire and getting a Silverwing Familiar down. So a very commanding position on the board already with this Rakano Outlaw and Silverwing Familiar on an unchecked board by Mephy.
Yeah, he's got the Torches and Vanquish for removal, so if he can keep stacking up those Warcry triggers and Mephy has units instead of removal spells, he's not going to be able to contest the board all that well. Mephy does answer back with a Countess, so something on the board at least, and attacks in with it since it doesn't block too well against the quick draw.
Yeah, no, not particularly. And that was that Countess I had a feeling he might have been keeping around. I have a feeling we'll also see another 4-drop come down here, or an Argenport Instigator, maybe with a removal to back it up, push in a little bit of incidental damage. Manilojo picking up a nice 5/5 Crown Watch Paladin. That will be pretty solid for him. And he's just going to go ahead and torch away these units and go ahead and get the swing in. And with no prompt at either of those torches, Mephy not holding anything. Not in a great position, getting beat down by these minions on the board. And we see a big 5/5 Crown Watch Paladin come down out of hand. And Mephy is on the back foot by quite a bit. He's going to have some sweet plays here to get him back into this.
Yeah, Manilojo's got a really good board position and a Vanquish as backup in case Mephy has any kind of, Champion of Chaos or something in order to stop his Crown Watch Paladin beats. So it's looking tough for Mephy here.
Yeah, interestingly enough, though, Mephy with that Statuary Maiden, that's one of the better draws he could have had. Locks down the ground for the time being, so now he's just going to need some way to deal with this Silverwing Familiar that keeps poking him in the air. But he has at least stabilized the board with this. Ooh, and an Umbran Reaper. Umbran Reaper is sick pickup here. This is going to block very well, and he's not too sad if it dies. Probably will get vanquished away by Manilojo, but the trigger will still go off, buying him 5 extra life, which at the current rate we're seeing life changed is 5 extra turns.
Yeah, and the damage doesn't hurt. It helps keep Manilojo's health total manageable, as Mephy is at the end of the day also a deck that wants to be getting in and dealing big chunks of damage. We're getting to the point where we could see Stone Scar Maul as an out to that 5/5 Crown Watch Paladin, just one power away. Not sure that Mephy has it though. Seems to be considering what to play.
Yeah, considering what to play. And he is in basically the same board position he was in, but he's going to decide to swing everything in here I interesting.
Mm.
I felt like I would have let myself take the extra 5 there just to get the 2/2 off the board for free.
The
But
attack the attack that makes the most sense there is if he's representing Torch, since that would boost the or allow the 2/2 to chop through the Statuary Maiden, whereas neither Torch nor Finest Hour would change the combat math on blocking the 5/5. So probably takes the safer line there, I would expect,
yeah,
was his reasoning.
yeah, I think you got it right. I'm not a big fan of that line, especially depending on what Mephy's holding in hand. We see that Obliterate come out, for example. He may not be in a position where he can take risks like that. We see the Valkyrie Enforcer get picked up, so he would have gotten punished. So better line of play for him the way he did it. But we see this Valkyrie Enforcer that's going to come down and silence this champion. Probably going to swing with the board, trying to push damage here, and then he'll have the Righteous Fury for the turn after to go ahead and drop that on one of his units and really start putting a massive life swing play. Mephy is going to have to find some answers very quickly for this board.
Yep, so I'm just checking through the deck list, and Mephy does not actually play um, any Death Strikes, so he does need to take that out in the main phase with the Obliterate that we see here. And an unbuffed Silverwing Familiar does not combine with Righteous Fury to be that impressive. It just doubles the amount of poking it can do per turn. So with that power talk there for Manilojo, Mephy's sort of clawed his way back into the game, and taking down that Silverwing Familiar puts him in a commanding position.
Yeah, it really does. Now that he actually got that down, like he was able to clear the whole board up. Sword of Icaria, ooh, as a 5/4 too. Normally a 3/2, or even with the one buff, a 4/3 would have been cleared away really easily. But now that he's got it down as a 5/4, this is looking really nice for him.
So that turns us
Curious.
back in the other direction because the sword should be able to clear the next unit, and then those Warcry triggers are going to make Righteous Fury better. Um, or if there's no unit at all, that's even better for Manilojo.
Yeah, very true. We see the Vanquish picked up, so that'll help him clear anything that comes out if he needs to, and he'll get another swing in with the weapon. And I think that's honestly just going to do it at this rate. Mephy would need at least a torch here to clear the weapon, but then he's going to need some way to interact with this 5/7 on the board. And I'm pretty sure that's gonna be it. I can't see a situation Mephy gets out of this here. And Manilojo going
No,
ahead and sweeping up the first game.
Righteous Fury, generally a pretty good card against these kinds of decks. Didn't quite get to see it work out there, but just weapons are very good when your opponent's strategy is to play a bunch of low attack deadly units, and that's kind of how that game ended up. So looking
Yeah.
at sideboards here, um,
Things that I find interesting. Manilojo, interestingly enough, has an assembly line and a bunch of Grenadin drones in here in his Rakano deck, hinting towards the idea that he wants to convert in some matchups to a super aggressive deck where he's just putting a
well,
lot of little units on the board and going wide.
those are adapted from some of Unearthly's lists. We saw that Unearthly was also playing the Grenadin drones. I believe they're actually anti-Jito tech is the general thing. You fight their tokens with your own tokens to spread out the board. If he was going to go for a more transformational board, you'd see more of the rallies and things to come in with them. So I think they're defensive options rather than offensive.
Oh, that's a very good point you make. So we probably will not see that here since this is not Burn Queen, but Sunskar Maulers instead. So no Grenadins, no Ruins. How much removal did we see floating around that game? You think you're bringing in all 4 of these protects?
Um, I think you bring in a couple protects. I don't think you overload on them. You're still trying to be an aggressive. You're still an aggressive deck against an aggressive deck, and you can't afford to cut too many of your units for spells, since you still need those Warcry triggers to get going, and um, you still need to have removal for their threats. So it's a delicate balance that you need to hit. And yeah, looking at Manilojo's sideboarding here, he brings in 2 copies. They're mismatch premiums, which tears me up inside to no end, but it's still 2 copies.
copies indeed. And Mephy, real quick before they jump into game, he's got 4 ruins, a suffocate, 2 annihilates, 4 plagues, and 4 furnace mages. I have to imagine we'll see some attachment hate coming in to help deal with a lot of the weapons Rakano produces. Possibly also seeing those annihilates come in, since a lot of the threats we saw are single color, easy to remove, annihilate, very efficient. Probably that suffocate as well. I have to imagine you're just going to pack as much removal as possible for those early units, since the Stone Scar Mauler's deck tends to not have a lot to do on the first and second turn outside of trading units around with removal.
Yeah, the removal coming in makes sense. Plague, probably not the matchup for it. And I'd imagine some combination of Ruin and Furnace Mage are going to be coming in, but again, you don't want all of those copies, since the problem that some people have is overboarding, where they bring in too many reactive options to their opponent's strategies, and they take out too many of the core parts of their primary game plan. So you need to be careful not to do that, and I think Manilojo has struck a good balance. We'll have to see what Mephy has done as we jump back into Game 2, with Manilojo up 1-0. As this is the final Swiss round of the tournament, and we are in the 4-1 bracket, the player that wins this will proceed to top 8 at 5-1. The player that loses will need to rely on breakers in 4-2 in order to make it onwards. So, Mephy's fighting for his tournament life, at least to keep it within his hands.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what kind of a start he has. Manilojo, with a bit of an interesting start here, can actually get these Champions of Glory down as 1-3s, but lacking the second fire influence to turn them into an offensive powerhouse. So a bit of a slow start out of him, given that.
Yeah, he's got some of his more expensive higher end cards. And no good answer to that first Champion of Chaos, which comes down as a 4-4 out of torch range. He could attack and trade if he wanted to. His Champion of Glory does not have quick draw, so it would be a just straight trade for trade, and I imagine Mephy would just let this through.
Yeah, as Mephy, when you see this attack coming in, you 100 out of 100 times assume that they've got the torch or the finest hour to follow it up with to try and give you the trade. So wisely deciding not to block the Champion of Glory there, and Manilojo just getting a second Champion of Glory down. Mephy's at the point where he can kind of start putting the pressure on, like it's at his pace. This torch, unfortunately, will still trade. And Manilojo actually electing to let that Champion of Glory go down so that he can get the torch trade here. But
Interesting that Mephy respects the combat trick on the attack. On when Manilojo attack, but not on the defensive, as something like Finest Hour still would have been pretty good there. I guess he's determined that he just wants to clear the board, prevent Manilojo from playing the Seed of Glory and getting the quick draw Champions of Glory, which are much more annoying than the 1-3 versions.
Yeah, very true. And I think he was also playing around the idea that it probably was torch based on the decision making. He might have been punished a little bit more for the finest hour, but by the same token, you do have to get that finest hour out of the opponent's hand of. So deciding he was willing to make that sacrifice, and we see Manilojo getting in with the big Soulfire Drake, but that's going to be answered by this Umbran Reaper in the air. And wow, actually deciding not to, does not want the Warcry or the Entomb effect to go off. So he's just going to push 10 damage here, and he might have like an Obliterate to follow up. Or
he's winning the race quite handily.
Yeah. He's not really in a position where he's too scared, and at any point this Umbran Reaper can just explode and produce damage that way. So
a bit of an interesting interaction. He can use Protect to prevent the Umbran Reaper Entomb from damaging him, but he needs to decide if he does block that way. He does not get the. Okay.
interesting.
I'm not feeling that attack personally. but it seems that Manilojo has decided that he's going to be unable to come back from this position and would like to fight it out in Game 3.
Yeah, wants to fight that out in Game 3. Definitely an interesting decision there. Not sure I agree either, but either way, we are going to go ahead and hit sideboarding for just a second before we jump back into. And looks like the players are about to be ready. So we actually should be jumping into our challenge screen right away. Always nice. And I mean, what does... I guess this matchup, most of this matchup really is just about like how good of a start you have. And I had noted that Manilojo's start was okay, but it wasn't anything fantastic. Not being able to pressure any damage there was kind of a problem. Like he ended up losing because he could not win it out in the race.
Yeah, the Rakano deck has some potential of burning it out, but the deck with the Flame Blast and the Obliterate and stuff, and the Umbran Reaper specifically, represent just such a huge life swing that if you can actually get that off, get the attack and the Entomb, it's such an enormous swing in any aggro versus aggro match. That's really the turning point, I think. Soulfire Drake is nice and all, but it's more of a long-term value, whereas Umbran Reaper just gives you that quick burst of damage.
Yeah, Umbra Reaper's a really nice little finisher. We haven't seen a lot of them recently, but definitely when I started playing, and to this day, Umbra Reaper's still one of the scariest threats the Stones card deck can pull out. It just represents such a massive life swing. Definitely in a matchup like this, where you are playing very aggressive decks that are basically just trying to create the fastest clock that they can.
Yep. And total difference from last game. This time, Mephy's got the deadly side of the Champion of Chaos. So Manilojo is a lot less willing to use his, in this case, Finest Hour combat trick to trade with it. And decides instead to go for the Silence. Whereas if it was an Overwhelm, the Finest Hour would have been able to trade it off a little bit better. But missing that power drop does hurt Mephy.
Yeah, it definitely does hurt him. And with the silence on the Champion of Chaos, it's not a particularly threatening unit anymore. And this could give Manilojo a nice little opening to really start taking over. It's going to depend on if Mephy hits his power and what else he has to follow up this Champion of Chaos. Notably lacking a lot of red fire influence. So he's not able to cast any of his key burn, essentially. None of it's going to be online for quite a while.
No, Mephy needs to draw power basically right away, or he's going to be too far behind in this game, I think, to be able to come back. Manilojo took an interesting line that was more defensive, held up Torch, but Mephy's he's unable to answer anything that's going on, and may take a swift demise to the Rakano player.
Yeah, he's definitely like tearing through him at this point. And Mephy does finally pick up another power, so he's got the Steward, but we see the Finest Hours in Manilojo's hand means that the Steward is probably just going to trade off a single unit, and there will be a bunch of damage pushed through. And that Seed of Glory is actually a pretty big pickup. That's going to put another 2 damage on the Champion of Glory and make it even scarier than it already was.
Well, he can no longer block Champion with
Steward, yeah.
With Steward, yeah. So this is an interesting attack.
Yeah,
Just
that is
Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. That is kind of an interesting attack. It's like Manilojo really valued the effect of the 2/4 or the body more, so he decided not to commit it there. But I really was not a big fan, and now we see a giant Hammer of Might picked up, and I have to say I not to criticize his play anymore, but I really would have liked to see that Hammer come down on the Crown Watch Paladin, because the 2/4 would have gotten traded there with the Death Touch.
Well, Mephy does not play any Death Strikes, but he does have this Ruin that he brought in, which is going to turn that 9/9 into just Warcry 3. So give him a bit of breathing space here. If he can potentially get something down here, maybe an Umbran Reaper, there we go. Okay, so we're starting to turn the corner in the game. Manilojo does have a Silverwing Familiar that's going to cause him a lot of problems, but if Mephy can then handle that, he may be back in an okay shape.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say is Mephy having the Umbran Reaper is very important. It's going to matter how many of these Umbran Reapers he has. He needs a lot more than one here. He needs 2 or 3 at least to put himself in a good position, because this Silverwing Familiar is going to cause him a massive headache trying to remove it.
Interesting use of the finest hour there. If Mephy does have a second Umbran Reaper, things get a lot better for him. Or even just a Stone Scar Maul can take it out. He does have a second Umbran Reaper. If Manilojo still had that finest hour, he could use it on the Silverwing. But now, since he decided to value the Longhorn Sergeant, he's not able to do that, and the Umbran Reaper will trade.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, like there's so many Warcries getting stacks on top of the deck, but at the same time, Mephy just continues to have these threats, and this is what happens when you get power screwed early on, is that you're often holding these very expensive cards that you can't play. And now that he's finally broken over the area that he needed to get to. He finally needed to get to 5 power, and he got it. Once he got there, he was able to start laying out very high impact cards. And Manilojo, on the other hand, now that Obliterate cleared off the Champion of Glory, he's really not packing anything. And yeah, there it is. We see a third Umbran Reaper, and I'm not very surprised.
Uh-oh. This could turn it. If Mephy has another Ruin, he's already seen one. This could be a very good turn for him. Otherwise, he's going to need to chump block here.
Oh, I think
And
that's
he
it.
did
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, with the fast spell.
He does.
Yeah, it was the Ruin. I had a feeling that wasn't Torch. He was holding on to the Ruin, and he does indeed. He gets the trade here. Health total has stabilized quite a bit, and the 4th Umbran Reaper coming down. Now Mephy is just completely in control. Yeah, we see the check. That is 4. That is in fact 4, Manilojo. You're not deceiving yourself.
We talked about how good those were in an aggro matchup, and they're showing it here. And that one's even foil, just to show off. Manilojo does have 7 Warcry triggers on top of his deck, though. So depending on what those hit, this game could, again, take another turn. If it hits a Silverwing Familiar or something, we're going back the other way.
Yeah,
so it all comes down to those Warcries.
Yeah, that is very true. Like, these Silverwing Familiars could be important, but in the meantime, like, Mephy not letting up on the gas, still putting down 5/5s, and Champion of Chaos is definitely a really good unit. And oh man, that Champion of Chaos is so good here. Like, it's so impressive. Now that you know the Warcries are eaten up, I mean, you're not scared. You just all in here. Like, you can't be scared of Manilojo. You know that there's no single card he's going to rip that's going to produce more than 5 damage. All the Warcries are on top of the one unit right there. He doesn't even need to in the end. Has the 8 damage Flame Blast to close it out. And Mephy is going to get that series 2-1 with 4 Umbran Reapers in that last game. What a unit, man. What a powerful unit. I've always said this, but like, Umbran Reaper never ceases to amaze me. Like, when you draw them in multiples like that, it's just so hard for your opponent to deal with. Manilojo lost 20 points of health there. He lost 20 points of health with the Umbran Reaper. And on the other side, Mephy gained 20 points of health. Like, this is such a 40 points of life, like 40 points in life difference. That is like a whole life difference.
Well, we called the match correctly. Once that one Umbran Reaper came down, we said it was a good start, but he'd need a couple more. Well, he had 3 more to back it up, and they took him all the way home. So, wow, it just goes to show, even if you're get behind early, even if it's against an aggressive deck like Rakano, there are tools you can use to play back. And we saw the potential misapplication of the finest hour on the Longhorn Sergeant.
Yeah,
ended up punishing him when he couldn't use it later to buff up his Silverwing Familiar and push through the Umbran Reaper. So, very interesting how that turned out.
Yeah, interesting that you note that, though. It definitely would have made a difference, although it's hard to say how much of a difference. It might have slowed the clock down, but the Silverwing Familiar still would have died the following turn to the Umbran Reaper. Since we do see, obviously, he had 4 of them. The next Umbran Reaper would have hopefully cleaned it up. It definitely would have made the game a lot more interesting, though. It would have given Manilojo an option to play more defensively and just hold his Silverwing Familiar to block instead of overextending with it. Or on the other hand, he could just continue to attack with it over and over and basically force the Umbran Reapers to be sacked. We actually just got some top 8 results in, so we can give you a few of your players that will be in the top 8, which we will be getting to very shortly. We have Mesmerizer coming in as our 6-0 of the tournament with Stone Scar aggro. We have Taboo?
Tabu?
Tabu? Sure,
Tabu, I
Tabu.
think.
Yeah, sure, Tabu.
We're guessing with some of these names.
Yeah, we're going to guess with a few of these names. So we got Tabu at 5-1 with Stone Scar Burn. He is guaranteed in. We have Shapak or X-Pack.
Spapak, I think.
Spapak, sure. Nah, I don't know
That's
about
what
all that. But we'll get the confirmation from the man himself. But he is also 5-1 with Burn Queen. We have Marius 294, 5-1 as well with Akaria Blue getting in. We have Catalyst with Big Combry going 5-1, locking himself a position as well. And our last 5-1 that we just saw on the feature match, Mephy, getting in with Stone Scar Maulers. So a lot of Stone Scar and Stone Scar based colors here, but we also do have some Akaria Blue representation, as well as Big Combry, and we still are waiting on the results of the 4-2 tiebreakers. So we will have 2 more players get added to that list.
And it's interesting that every one of the Stone Scar burn decks are built, at least a little bit differently. Some of them have Maiden, some of them have Stone Scar Maul, some of them have Stash, some of them don't. Some of them have Queen. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. And it's sort of turning into what it was a number of months ago, where people were talking about, man, Combry's got all these good cards. They can build all these different kind of decks. And well, now it looks like Stone Scar's the one that's got a whole bunch of good cards and a whole bunch of options for how you want to play the factions. Just because you're playing, Torch and some kind of shadow removal spell in the same deck doesn't mean you're playing the same deck as everybody else at the top of the table. We got 4 different choices for you here.
Yeah, definitely. Very different. Not all completely different, but there are definitely variants in all of these decks. Like certainly variants. I think